Yeah. New guys coming to you live. You could bet this like Jerome. New guys are men of steel. Best coverage in the league. Prime Reavers on the field. Don't know better ask. G-Nick, the hype is real. Gurus with the knowledge, you can check the mass appeal. They gon' turn your fantasies into dollar bills. Making dynasties from drafts like the Spurs when they build. Want the bragging rights and titles at your work. Let the new guys serve the wisdom to you first. I ain't advertising, just kicking facts. They turn average Joes to Drakes cause they winning back to backs. So sit back, relax, all ears when they speak. And rain on competition with anything they leak. Make leagues joy gray like Ramsey did Reek. Passing off the mic, I'm out here, peace.
Welcome back. We're entering week 3 of the NFL. Once again, I'm here with my cousin Nick, and we're going to recap week 2 and just sort of do Q&A. How's it going down there?
It's going good. Big week 2. A lot of stuff to talk about. So, let's get to it.
Yeah, some crazy outcomes. So we'll just jump right in for time's sake and start with, I guess, the Thursday game, which was Baltimore at Cincinnati. The Bengals won 34-23 and really dominated in the first half. A.J. Green had 3 touchdowns on 3 receptions at one point, which was unsustainable, but most likely won certain people their week and lost it for others. And for Baltimore, their leading receiver was not Michael Crabtree, it was actually John Brown with 92 yards, and he received 10 targets. So Nick, I want to ask you, do you still think Michael Crabtree is the receiver to own in Baltimore? And also, since Joe Mixon is probably missing 3 to 4 weeks, how relevant do you think that makes Giovanni Bernard?
Yeah, I think John Brown's the guy there. I think he looked good in preseason. I think they've gone out of their way to target him. He's more of a speedster, and I think that's kind of complementing what they want to do more in this new offense. So yeah, I would definitely take a shot on John Brown. If you have him starting, you don't maybe try and make a trade for him. And then on the Joe Mixon case, I'm not sure about Gio Bernard, if they're going to make him the whole feature back, or if they're going to give some touches to other guys. I don't know who their third string is. But I think it could be worth the waiver pickup. But I don't know if I would start him right away, maybe keep him on your bench a week and see how it goes. But yeah, you'll definitely have to monitor that situation and see how many touches he's getting each week.
In the past, Gio Bernard's been very productive when he's had the job to himself, but I agree. We'll see what his usage is next week and how Mixon's recovery is going. And I just want to ask you something real quick, because John Ross was considered the speedster for Cincinnati, and many thought he would break out this year, but really, across from A.J. Green, it looks like Tyler Boyd has been Dalton's top receiver. Do you think over the course of the season that will change, or just sort of hot hand approach?
Yeah, I still think John Ross is the number 2 guy. Just because they drafted him 9th overall. I know he had a long touchdown in preseason. How good of a number 2 guy he'll be for you, I don't know. But I still think it is his job to as number 2 guy to Cincinnati behind A.J. Green.
All right, fair enough. On to the Sunday games, and the first one I have here is Carolina at Atlanta, which Atlanta won by a touchdown. Tevin Coleman ran for over 100 yards, Cam threw for 335, and McCaffrey once again dominated the Carolina backfield. Was there anything surprising in this game for you?
No, I thought Atlanta was a much better team. I projected them to win by a lot last week. The offense looked awesome. The defense even didn't look too bad with even though they lost Deion Jones and Keanu the other week before. One thing to monitor, Devontae Freeman still is out a couple more weeks. So if you have Tevin Coleman, continue to play him. I know he had an okay game. Julio again had a decent game, not too bad. So yeah, not too many surprises with that game.
Hmm. And Devin Funchess' targets and receptions went up with the loss of Greg Olsen, which was expected. Last year when Greg Olsen missed time, Carolina really leaned on McCaffrey and Funchess. And I know Samuel's still out in their receiving corps, so if you have Devin Funchess and are in a deeper league or once bye weeks hit, he could be a reasonable plug-in for your rosters. The Chargers played at Buffalo and won 31-20. Melvin Gordon looks to be more utilized in the passing game this season, and Austin Eckler is actually getting a lot of run as well. Do you think they're both starters now?
I don't know if I'd consider Eckler a starter. Gordon obviously is having an awesome year. He should continue to do that in that high-scoring offense. I do like Eckler a lot. I would probably give him a flex play in a PPR league. Definitely not in a normal league, though. But I want to see them go against an elite defense. They've gone against the Chiefs, which their offense might be awesome, but their defense definitely isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Then they went against Buffalo last week, obviously. Obviously, that's no elite defense. So I want to see how they fare against a good defense and see if they still continue to use both guys in the way that they are.
Yeah, Buffalo makes me very nervous. They're most likely the worst team in football. They're this year's version of the Cleveland Browns. So if you do Eliminator Challenge or Pick'em games, I would pick whoever's versing Buffalo on almost a weekly basis. Is there anyone on that team that you want to roster, or are you just steering completely clear?
I mean, shady just based on history, but even he isn't looking good this year.
He has one or two cracked ribs too now.
Oh yeah, does he? I didn't even see that.
So I don't know.
Is he playing?
He played through something similar, I think 2 years ago, but they haven't made a ruling on it yet. So that's just something to monitor. Their whole team makes me nervous. I expect a lot of garbage time, but at least we'll get to see what Josh Allen's made of throughout this year. Next was Minnesota at Green Bay, and this was the second tie of the season. Kirk Cousins hit Stephon Diggs for a touchdown, Adam Thielen for a touchdown. Any clarity on which receiver has the edge over the other one?
I don't even know if I'd give either of them an edge. I think they're both pretty equal. I think they might be the only team in the league that doesn't have a true number one. They have two of them.
Yeah, they have a 1A, 1B situation going.
Yeah, so I feel comfortable starting both of them, because it's not like, week one goes off, the other does nothing, and then the next week it's vice versa. Usually they both do pretty solid. They both, none of them, they're not really putting up Star Wars numbers, but they're both putting up solid numbers. I think they might have been both around 20, 25 this week.
Mm-hmm. Well, it helps when Kirk Cousins throws for 425 and multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, so I would play both of them. I was kind of surprised by that game, though. The ending was definitely interesting with the whole Clay Matthews thing.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I did not think that was a foul. I thought that was kind of a dumb call. But I guess that's what they're shifting towards more with the league.
There's been a couple calls. That one just happened to affect the course of the game.
Yeah, that was like a fourth down incompletion that would have ended it. So that was definitely an interesting thing.
On Green Bay's side, Jamal Williams accumulated 59 rushing yards. Aaron Jones comes back this week. Personally, I think he's the most explosive of their trio. I don't know when he'll take that job, or if they'll continue to use a committee approach. But if you were plugging Jamal Williams in or Ty Montgomery, it's just something to be wary of, because the situation's a bit murkier now. Devonta Adams is a stud. Aaron Rodgers connected more with Jimmy Graham this week than he did last, so their report's starting to develop. And Geronimo Allison had relevance once again, so that was a nice surprise. I thought, since they were in catch-up mode, it might just be a fluky week, but he targeted him a handful of times against Minnesota, so he's a name to consider for bye week fill-ins. Did you have anything else from this game?
Not too much. I think
Mm-hmm. All right, so then the next game was Houston at Tennessee. I'll let you take this one.
I was surprised, man. I don't know how Tennessee won that game.
I called this one.
Yeah, that was a good call by you, dude. Blaine Gabbert, I think they were starting. Beat Deshaun Watson. I was in shock. They had that long special teams play. I think it was
The 66-yard fake.
Yeah, it went like 70 yards or something. That was awesome. I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. The Texans have not looked well this year, and they, yeah, I don't know. Deshaun Watson hasn't looked like what he was last year. Mahomes has really taken the spotlight in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be an interesting matchup to see how he plays against the Giants this week. Another good defense going against.
Personally, I wouldn't mind if Houston is in disarray one more week because the Giants need to win desperately.
Yeah, both teams are win both teams.
But I mean, I said, I believe in our first recording this season that I thought Will Fuller was kind of fluky, but once again he went over 100 yards. He had 113, and you know, once is a fluke, twice is a trend. We'll see if that continues this season, but there's a chance I was wrong on that. Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson really did seem to have a connection despite the outcome of the game. Derrick Henry's making me very, very nervous.
Yeah, he's not having a good year so far.
I have stock in him in 2 leagues, and I will not be playing him anytime recently. Dion Lewis just looks like the better back. He's led the backfield in targets, receptions, rushing yards, receiving yards, snaps, just every statistical category except for touchdowns. They each have 1 touchdown. So if you have Dion Lewis, roll him out. But Derrick Henry has been sort of scary. On to Cleveland at New Orleans, and the Saints won a close game, 21-18. And that offense is pretty much just Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, when Mark Ingram comes back, week 5, how do you think that's going to play out?
I think it'll be much of the same, honestly. I think Kamara's only averaging 9 or 10 carries a game so far, and he's still doing awesome. I know Gillislee's had maybe, I think Gillislee's averaging like 6 or 7 too. So it's really not that much of a dominant factor of what that Kamara is getting. Everyone knows he's more of a pass game threat, so I don't really think it'll hurt them that much. If anything, it honestly could be good for him. I think that offense is much better with Mark Ingram. I think he's a good complement, so it opens it up a little bit. So I really am not scared for Kamara's production.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's close to a 1A, 1B situation as well. But Kamara is great in space. He could run between the tackles. He could do it all. I don't think it'll affect his value negatively, but I think it will be a boost to the offense overall. For Cleveland, Josh Gordon got traded to the Patriots for a 5th-round pick, and Callaway had a touchdown in this game, a deep, deep touchdown. He's expected to be their second wide receiver behind Jarvis Landry. I think the absence of Josh Gordon benefits him, and it also will benefit David Njoku, who should get more red zone looks and more targets in general without Josh Gordon there. We'll see what happens with Gordon in New England, if he plays this week coming up or if he remains on the team in general. But yeah, Cleveland was close to pushing this game to overtime as well. I know there were video recordings of their fans wanting a tie. We want a tie. We want a tie. And that's now my new favorite slogan. So, but I think there's a chance. I wouldn't say this is an upset, but I think Cleveland could beat the Jets tomorrow.
I don't know if I call that an upset.
they're home. They've played better, and I wouldn't say it's an upset, but I think tomorrow there's a decent chance they get their first win in 2 years.
Something like that. Yeah, I think it'll be a coin flip that game.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the Jets, the next game was Miami at MetLife, and Miami won the divisional game 20-12. And Sam Darnold threw for 334 yards. Once again, his favorite target was Quincy Enunwa, which I think at least this week is a trend that should continue because he seems comfortable with the higher percentage passes, and they're on a short week. They play tomorrow, Thursday. So if you have Enunwa, depending on your other receivers, I think he should be a decent play this week. For Miami, Kenyon Drake scored a touchdown, but they still used Frank Gore more than Drake owners would have liked, I feel. Is there any clarity on that backfield? I mean, I know it's Drake's job, but do you think over time they'll steer more towards giving him 3-down work?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really too big on either of them. I do think it's more Drake's job. Do I think Kenyon Drake's a 3-down back in the NFL? Probably not. So I think it should stay around the same, maybe a couple more carries, but nothing too crazy.
I disagree a little bit, just because, Kenyon Drake is a home run play if he, gets in open space. We've seen him go for numerous 60-plus yard touchdown runs last season when he was getting all the work he could handle. And worth noting, Miami is actually 2-0 right now and leading the division. So if they beat the Jets and start out 3-0, they may really be not looking towards the playoffs, but I personally didn't think they were going to be that good this year. And so far, I know they haven't versed top competition, but if they continue to win, they may start focusing towards the playoff push rather than just staying afloat in the division, because they beat the Jets, they beat the Titans, and next week they play home against Oakland, who's 0-2, and I think that's also a winnable game. So there's a chance Miami starts out 3-0 with Ryan Tannehill back. But we'll see. I still don't think they're that good, but if they do continue to win, I think they might lean towards their best players more, which would be Kenyon Drake. I think then they'd start giving him more touches. Next is Kansas City at Pittsburgh, and this shootout ended with Kansas City winning on the road 42-37, and let me hear it.
Yeah, the Steelers look awful, dude. That defense, I think it's TJ Watt, and I don't even know who else is on that team. But Pat Mahomes, once again, is proven to be the real deal. I think he had 6 touchdowns this week or something. That makes it 10 after 2. And yeah, I mean, a couple of them have been just flips to Tyreek Hill or Kareem Hunt. So it's definitely not all just gunslinging, but man, he hasn't made too many mistakes. I think that offense right now is top in the league. Definitely will need work eventually. I think Eric Berry's been out the first 2 weeks, but when he comes back, it should get better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the Steelers or a Steelers fan, you got to be thinking what's going on. I know they have a Monday night matchup against the Bucs next week, so if you can't, or this week, so you guys can't steal a win there, then you might have to start doing mock drafts or something.
So Kansas City, Sammy Watkins had a big game. I still think that's going to vary. I don't think that's going to be a consistent performance for him every week, just because, like you said, Travis Kelce had a good game. Tyreek Hill in space has led to a handful of Mahomes touchdowns. They still have Kareem Hunt. I just think there's so many weapons there that Watkins won't do what he did on a weekly basis. For Pittsburgh, their leading receiver was actually their tight end Jesse James last week.
Yeah, good game.
Yeah, 138 yards. I don't want to say this is because of Bell holding out, but I am intrigued to see if Bell were to come back, would that right the ship? Because I know tensions on their O-line were high, before the start of week 1. The tie didn't help, in Cleveland. And now they just lost to potentially one of the 2 hottest teams in the NFL, Kansas City. It would be interesting to see how things would play out if Bell were to return, say, tomorrow. But yeah, I agree there's some issues there behind closed doors that hopefully we'll get some clarity on over time, or hopefully they'll figure it out and start winning again.
Antonio Brown wasn't too happy either. He went off. I don't think he showed up to practice on Monday, I saw.
Yeah, and he tweeted trade me to somebody as well.
That's someone. Yeah, I don't think he's too happy that Juju's getting a lot of the targets. So that'll definitely be something to watch too.
I mean, Juju's played pretty well.
Yeah.
Stick with what's working. It's just defenses could put more emphasis on the receivers without Bell there, although James Conner has played well.
Yeah, he's played awesome. I don't really know. With Bell, typically better. Back in football.
The
I don't
next.
think they beat the Chiefs with him, though. I don't think they would have beat the Chiefs if they had Bell, though.
I don't think so. I mean, it was a 5-point game, but.
But they were coming back. It was a couple garbage time plays, so I think they were just outplayed.
Yeah. Next was the Super Bowl. Philadelphia Eagles losing to Ryan McGregor. Fitzpatrick once again threw for over 400 yards, multiple touchdowns, and his top target, one of the best receivers in the game at this point of the season, has been Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah.
Would you start Deshaun Jackson next week? Not necessarily over Mike Evans, but over, say, Emmanuel Sanders or, players that are more wide receiver 2 flex range?
Yeah, I mean, it's only been 2 weeks, so I'm not going to overreact too heavy. But I would start him over like an Emmanuel Sanders. I definitely wouldn't start him over Mike Evans.
What about, say, Amari Cooper?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's like a close call. They're different. Deshaun Jackson's kind of like a boomer bust almost. He gets his long plays. I know he's been doing good this year, but for most of his career, it kind of comes down to if he gets that 60-yard catch in a game, that determines if he has a good week or not. That's kind of a hard thing to continue to hit on, even though he did just hit it on a really good team. So it's kind of a preference thing. If you want the more safe bet, a guy like Cooper who will get you, I don't know, maybe 10 points, or if you want Deshaun, he will go and get you 25. That's more of a preference thing. I think this week will be big just because the Steelers' D has not looked good. So I could see this continued success happening again after it just happened against the defending Super Bowl champions. So
let's say hypothetically Tampa beats Pittsburgh this week and then Winston comes back. There's no way you could bench Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? He's played too well, especially if they win again.
Yeah, I mean, even if they lose, I would probably keep playing Fitzpatrick. Just because, I mean, Jameis looked good I don't know what year he's in, but the beginning of his career looked a lot better than he had the last couple. And I mean, stick with what works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, I think he leads the league in passing yards. He's up there in touchdowns. He might be right behind Mahomes. So even if he goes into this week against the Steelers, doesn't have the best week, I would still keep playing him.
I just want to mention there seems to be a passing of the guard in regards to their tight ends. O.J. Howard has been getting more snaps than Cameron Brate. He had 3 receptions last week for, I think it was 93 yards and a touchdown. It's still a split there that, doesn't give fantasy owners a lot of confidence. But for dynasty purposes, if you have O.J. Howard, it seems to be that he's getting more work sooner rather than later. And on the Philadelphia side, I just want to touch on two things real quick. One is J.J. and Darren Sproles are both sort of banged up. Both didn't practice today on Wednesday. And there's a real chance Corey Clement leads that backfield next week for Philadelphia. And also Carson Wentz is going to be starting next week, which should benefit that offense overall. Mike Wallace, actually there's more than two things now that I'm thinking about. Mike Wallace is out for the year. He got hurt last week. And the fourth thing, it's kind of funny. The Eagles traded Jordan Matthews to Buffalo for Ronald Darby, and now they've re-signed Jordan Matthews. So full circle, yeah. So they really gave up nothing, like literally nothing, to get Ronald Darby.
He's played really well the last 2 years.
So that's a lot on the Philadelphia side. Which of these do you think is the most impactful, and why?
I don't really know how much relevance Jordan Matthews will have. I still think once Alshon comes back, he'll be the third best receiver on that team, maybe even fourth. I don't really know their depth chart.
Mm-hmm.
I think Corey Clement's looked pretty good though this year. I think he'll definitely have to be monitored how long it takes a guy to deal with his injury. I don't know if he'll miss any time or just to get healthy fully. But I think he could definitely be worth a pickup in some leagues.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a deeper league at 12-man or something, or 16. That's basically it. I mean, obviously, the offense will be much better now with Carson now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's questioning that. I think they average, I forget the number, but they average definitely more points with him behind center.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just better than Foles. Foles is kind of streaky. I know everyone liked him because of the Super Bowl and stuff, and I like him too. I think he could start for a bunch of teams in the NFL, but Carson's their guy, and that should open the offense a lot.
Now, they verse your Colts next week. How you feeling about that game?
Yeah, we'll probably lose. I mean, we could get more into this in the one that we're going to do about next week's games. But I'm actually really happy about the place the Colts are at now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'll get to that when we talk about the game, but I think the Eagles should win this week just because.
Well, that's actually the next game, the Colts at Washington. So if you want to dive on into it, go for it.
Yes. All right. Yeah, we looked awesome. I was super happy with this game. I think if we won this game 42-37, I'd be a lot less happy than I am now.
Mm-hmm.
We won 21-9, won by 12 points. The defense didn't let up a touchdown, and Andrew Luck didn't look good, which isn't a bad thing because I think everyone, I know Andrew Luck's back, everyone does. But this was a pretty average game for Andrew Luck. He had 175 yards, he threw a couple of picks, but he also had a couple of touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really the first game he's won in his career that he hasn't done a lot. I think it's the first win he has where he hasn't passed for at least 200 yards or something. And the defense looked awesome.
Yeah,
you're not going against an awful offense. I mean, they led the league in rushing week one. They had 185 rushing yards or something in week one.
Mm-hmm.
I think their running backs had like a total of 25 rushing yards or something.
Well, I want to shout out your rookie Darius Leonard with 18 tackles, a sack, and a forced fumble.
Yeah,
he had a huge game.
He had a pass defense too. Yeah, AFC Player of the Week.
Wasn't he a second rounder this year?
He was a second rounder. It's a funny story actually. He was supposed to be around the fourth rounder, maybe late third. But our GM went and picked him with the 36th overall pick. And it was a bit of a reach, but when he was going over tape and stuff and showed everyone the tape, he played at South Carolina. They played Clemson last year. And there was a game, or it was when they had Deshaun Watson. It was a game. He had 19 tackles in that game. So he thought he'd be a perfect fit for this defense. He unfortunately missed most of the offseason workouts and that stuff. Andrew Luck on one of his first plays in an NFL practice. And he's been lining it up all preseason. Week 1, he had a forced fumble too, or he recovered a fumble, and he had like 10 tackles. But this week, man, 18 tackles, that's a hard thing to do. I don't know many players who have gotten 18 tackles before. So I'm really excited. He's going to be a big staple of this defense for years to come. And this win gave me hope, man. It showed us that Colts could make some noise. You know, if we let up 30 points this week and just wanted to shoot out, wouldn't be that impressive because the defense is still awful. You're not going anywhere. But if the defense could play, then that changes things.
Well, stopping Washington is one thing, but we'll see if they could do it against Carson Wentz, which should be interesting because maybe he'll be rusty or a step slow since it's his first game back. I think I'm not going to say the Colts will win next week, but I think it is a winnable game.
Yeah, I see that too. I think we'll probably lose just because they're the better team.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could definitely win, and if we do, man, I think that gets the hype train going. I think the Colts would be one of the hot teams in the NFL.
The hype train.
Yeah, I think I might. I don't know if I'd rather play Carson Wentz than Nick Foles, but it's not that big of a difference just because it's Carson's first game back since the torn ACL.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely don't know how mobile he'll be. Obviously he's cleared, so he'll be fine, but he won't be like his usual self at least the first few games. So I don't know if it's that bad of a thing that he's actually starting.
Let me ask you one quick thing, because Eric Ebron got another touchdown this week. What's going on with Jack Doyle there?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, obviously he won't do as good as he did last year. He had 80 catches last year. That's become evident at this point. But still, Jack Doyle played, I think it was 59 of 62 offensive snaps. He had more routes than Ebron. He had more targets. It just didn't happen this week. Just didn't get the catches. But they even said Jack's the starting tight end. There's no question about it. Frank Reich came out and said, yeah, Ebron's doing good. We like him in the offense, but Jack's still the starting tight end just because he offers so much as a blocker, and he still has more experience. So I think both of them, honestly, you could play both of them, honestly. If it's that deep of a league and there's not many tight end options, I'd be comfortable playing either of them. From a fantasy standpoint, I would probably say PPR Jack Doyle's better, but not PPR. I'd probably give it to Ebron at this point just because of the touchdowns.
Yeah, he'll get the red zone looks.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something on the Washington side. If you're an Adrian Peterson owner, you saw they abandoned the run. That was more so because Washington got down early in this game. He had 15 less handoffs in week 2 than he did in week 1. So that's going to be something to monitor every week. Next week, Washington plays Green Bay. Realistically, Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay will probably get up in this game as well, and there's a chance Washington abandons the run once again. So that's going to be something, pick and choose where you play Peterson. But I do want to mention, because he's never been much of a pass catcher, through 2 games he does have 5 receptions, which is a nice little surprise for Peterson owners. But their backfield, I think the safer play on a weekly basis going forward is going to be Chris Thompson. Just because regardless of how the game plays out, he's going to get his targets, he's going to get his looks. The next game was Arizona at LA, and this was a sweep, 34-0. Jared Goff threw for 354 yards. Brandon Cooks had just under 160 of those. Their offense and defense look every bit the part of what we thought the Rams would be. Arizona does not. Nick, let me ask you, as a DJ owner, are you nervous? What's going on?
Yeah, man. I mean, I wrote about it in our message boards this week, the recap. That offense looks awful, dude. I don't know how they expect David Johnson to do anything. I compared Sam Bradford to Brucey from the longest yard. I don't know. They can't do anything. I do think he had a better week 1. I think week 1 he had somewhere around 15 points, which is a good week. So I'm not going to complain about that. And they were going against the best
Mm-hmm. Larry Fitzgerald, he's a little bit banged up right now, which would not help David Johnson because really that offense runs through the two of them, and if Fitz misses time, Johnson will face more stacked boxes, which is just something to pay attention to at least this week against Chicago and Khalil Mack. So I think David Johnson, things will get better in the future, but it might be another week before that changes. I think he's in for another rough week potentially. The next game was Detroit at San Fran. San Fran won 30-27 without Marquise Goodwin, who should be back this week. Last season for the games Garoppolo played for the 49ers, that was his top target, his speedster, and so I think that offense is going to look a whole lot better with him playing going forward. But yeah, San Fran won a close one. Matt Stafford looked a lot better this week than he did last week. But the defense, that Detroit defense, just looked awful. And I believe Slay left this game for a little bit of time as well. Did you have any big takeaways here, Nick?
I thought the 49ers were going to win by a little bit more. It started getting closer at the end. I don't think the Lions are that good of a team.
Mm-hmm.
There was evident week one when they got blown out by the New York Jets, and it's only going to get worse because they play the Patriots next week in Matt Patricia's return. So yeah, on that end, I don't know too much. I do think the 49er offense should be a little bit better with Marquise Goodwin, and Matt Breida's actually been surprising me this year. He looks good.
He looks really good.
He doesn't look like just a solid fill-in guy. He looks like a good running back. He looks quick. He looks like he has that big playability. So I'd like to keep on him and see if it continues.
Mm-hmm. Do you think at this point you'd rather play Matt Breida than Alfred Morris if you had the option?
Yeah, no, I'd play Breida. I'm not really playing Morris anymore if I have him. I think Breida's showing it's his team.
Mm-hmm. And for Detroit, I just want to ask you, which receiver do you prefer? Because Golden Tate and Marvin Jones were drafted significantly ahead of Galladay, but Kenny Galladay has received more targets than Marvin Jones and has looked like arguably the best receiver on that team.
Yeah, it's pretty close just because of Tate and Jones' history. But I'd probably go with Galladay at this point. I think he's more of the mismatch. You know, he's a bigger receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he'll have a better season of all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, personally, I hope you're right. I thought he could break out. I have him on 2 of my rosters. But we'll see. I don't think you could panic yet because game 1, I think, just really got away from Detroit. I think you need another week or 2 to see how targets and things pan out. But this was something that started in the preseason. Galladay was, running second along with Golden Tate. And Marvin Jones appeared to be the odd man out during the preseason. I mean, they run a lot of 3 wide sets, so I think all 3 of them should be fine. But this did seem to be a change that didn't pop out of nowhere. It was something that was taking place over the past 2 months or so. Next was Oakland at Denver. Oakland led the majority of the way. Derek Carr had a much more efficient game, but they ended up losing 20-19. And John Gruden is starting out 0-2. Do you have any takeaways from the Oakland offense? Because week 1 it was all Jared Cook. Week 2 it was all Amari Cooper.
Yeah, it's kind of fluky right now. I would probably continue to keep playing both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't think Amari Cooper's amazing, but I think he's proved to be a solid receiver through his career.
Mm-hmm.
And Jared Cook had such a big week 1 that I think you got to keep playing him. But
It's hard to ignore after that week 1.
Yeah, but the Raiders as a whole
Mm-hmm.
They got blown out 1, just lost the divisional matchup. So Gruden's not looking too good right now.
But
Especially since after the game, he said what they needed more of a pass rush.
mm-hmm.
We'll get that by trading away one of the best pass rushers in the league.
Yeah.
So it definitely wasn't too good of a response by him.
Yeah, he'll be taking heat for that
Yeah.
for the next year or two. But for as bad as Derek Carr looked in week 1, week 2 on the road at Denver, he completed 29 out of 32 passing attempts. 1 touchdown, no picks, only 288 yards, but he looked pretty good. So if you have Derek Carr, depending on your other options, it may be not an every week starter. It may depend on the matchup. But I feel like you have more confidence than you did after week 1. For Denver, Demaryius Thomas had a rough game, but once again, Philip Lindsay looked like the better running back, and Emmanuel Sanders looked like the top receiver there. Do you think it's Philip Lindsay's backfield now? Do you think it's going to continue to be a committee approach? Because Royce Freeman, once again, did not look that good.
Yeah, I still think it'll be a committee just because they're kind of opposites in what they do.
Thunder Lightning.
They're Lightning, yeah, the Speedster and the Bruiser. So yeah, I do think Lindsay look a lot better than Freeman, but I still think Freeman should continue to get carries, especially because he was such a high draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I'd be starting Royce Freeman at this point in the league. But if you have him in a dynasty league, definitely hold on to him because I think it should improve in the future.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I'd say we could agree on is Booker is the odd man out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. New England at Saxonville. I don't want to say my Jaguars because I'm a Giants fan, but Duval with a massive win. Jacksonville looked great.
Why did you say the Duval thing? Is that like the name of the town or something?
That's the county, yeah.
It's the county? Okay.
Duval County, yeah. Jacksonville won 31-20. They completely shut down Gronkowski. Bortles threw for 377 yards. Keelan Cole looked great. He had a one-handed catch. Channeled his inner Odell Beckham on that. D.D. Westbrook got in the end zone. Just Jacksonville looked like a dominant force without Leonard Fournette in this game.
Yeah, I think that goes to show you, too, the value of a running back always isn't that important.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have Leonard Fournette, and they still just beat the Patriots. So, and not just beat, they demolished the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we all know what happened on the Jacksonville side. They looked awesome. We don't have to get into that too much, but on the Patriots side, some guys actually surprised me. I think Sony Michel didn't look half bad. I think he had a couple nice plays. I think that could be good, especially as a Sony Michel owner, which I had in a few leagues. I was encouraged by that he was getting more involved in the offense back from his injury. So hopefully that continues. Then the other guy I own in most of my leagues, Chris Hogan, was awesome.
Yeah.
That surprised me because I actually didn't start him this week because I figured, he didn't have a good week 1. Now he's going to get to Jacksonville, probably not that much, but yeah, pretty long touchdown, and I think he had somewhere around 20 points. So, do you think that'll continue for him, or it'll slow down a lot when Julian Edelman comes back?
So I think that sort of depends. Jacksonville really put an emphasis on gridding Gronk in, multiple defenders on Gronk, really taking Gronk away. That was their strategy, and it worked. But that opens up the receivers. They pretty much said, if you're going to beat us, it's going to be through the running game and through your receivers. And it worked. Jacksonville won. I think Hogan should be fine going forward, at least until Edelman comes back, for a few reasons. Edelman's going to get he's sort of Tom Brady's safety blanket. He's one of the more tenured, he's the most tenured receiver on New England. Brady has that trust with him. I don't really think that will take away from Hogan. However, Josh Gordon passed his physical. If he ends up staying in New England, like if it works out, then that would be a concern. Because right now they have Philip Dorsett's there also, but if you add Josh Gordon and Julian Edelman, say 2-3 weeks from now, now Gordon knows the playbook, Edelman is healthy, I think it'll take away snaps and targets from Hogan, and it's going to be sort of hit or miss on a weekly basis. So I think you should feel fine in Hogan now. It's a trend that will continue at least until Edelman's return. He should play better than he did week 1. But if Edelman returns and Josh Gordon is still on the team by then I think I'd be nervous. I think potentially give it 1 week, see how Hogan plays, and then maybe sell high, try and ship him out for another piece. That's something I would consider doing. Because Josh Gordon's arrival, along with Edelman coming off suspension soon, does make me a little nervous. Is there anything else from either of these teams you want to touch on?
I don't know. How do you think the Josh Gordon experiment will play out? It'll work or no?
I think it will work. I think it'll take time, though. New playbook, and New England doesn't mess around. Like, if he's showing up late to practice and, showing up inebriated, he's gone. But that's something he has to know. I think the change of scenery will do him well, and he'll try to stay clean. He'll try to be punctual, and I think it will work out, but I don't think he's going to be the Josh Gordon of, 2014. I think he'll be more of the, realistically, like the third option in New England, because Gronkowski's Brady's top option, especially in the red zone. And then I think they're going to run a lot through James White. I think that's going to continue. I know Sony Michel looked great, but Brady last year did a lot of, checkdowns to White and Burkhead and Deion Lewis, and I think that's sort of the direction the offense is heading. So I think Gordon, it'll work out, but he's just going to be a third option, potentially.
Okay, and then, just so I remember, do you think Keelan Cole's the guy to own, or D.D. Westbrook?
If you asked me this last year during the preseason, I went to one of the preseason games and then a couple regular season games, and D.D. Westbrook was injured during the regular season games, but really impressed me in the preseason game against Tampa that I went to. I would have said Westbrook. After seeing the last 4 or 5 weeks last year when both of them were on the field, and the first 2 weeks here, I think they both have relevance, but I think Keelan Cole is the better player. My opinion has changed. I'd say it's Cole now, but I'd want stock in both of them. When Fournette comes back, defenses are going to have to focus more on stopping the run, and I think they'll both have relevance going forward.
Okay.
I don't think Moncrief will. I think it's, if you want a receiver, it's Keelan Cole, but D.D. Westbrook's a close second, and then that's it. I don't want Safarian Jenkins, I think, is their tight end right now. I don't want any part of that, or Dante Moncrief. But yeah, that's my opinion on them. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I'd probably say Cole's better right now. I definitely want to see Bortles continues to look like this.
Mm-hmm.
He's proved throughout his career he hasn't. So, it's hard to be a team in the NFL and be so good on both sides of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to have such a good defense, the best in the league, and then also have, a shootout offense.
Mm-hmm.
It just usually doesn't happen too much.
Well, even if Bortles looks okay, I think the defense will help him a bit, because he should get the ball, in good field position a couple times every game, because of that defense. Couple 3-and-outs, punts, Bortles gets the ball midfield. I think that will help the offense going forward.
Yeah, I can see that.
Anyway, 2 more games to get to. New York at Dallas. This one was awful. I really don't want to talk about this one, so I'll let you have at it.
Oh yeah, you want me to go for it?
Yeah, let me hear it.
Yeah, New York Football Giants have not looked too hot this year. The defense, I think, has looked well, but on the offense side of the ball, I think it just goes to show you can have all the skilled players in the world, but if you don't have the dogs up front, it doesn't make any difference.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, your dogs are looking like cats, man. Eli's under constant duress every single play. I know most people are saying it's his fault.
It's not his fault, though.
I'm not saying it's Eli's fault. I think it's the line's fault. You know, he could be a little more mobile, but if you can't block for him, you know, it doesn't matter. I think that problem needs to be addressed soon. I think you guys need to sign someone if you expect to contend this year, because right now that line will not help you out.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets the line for those? I know Stephon didn't have too many rushing yards because of the line, obviously, but I think he looked awesome in the pass game. I think he had 14 receptions or something like that.
Yeah, 14 for 80.
So if you have him in a PPR league, you should be pretty excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
But Odell kind of got locked down too. And again, that goes into the line. I know I said I wanted to stay away from it, but it kind of all comes back to it. It's easier, the lines look better when you do a check down to Saquon, but when you're expecting your big play guy to get deep, you know,
You need time for him to get downfield.
Yeah, and I mean Dallas has a good run defense and a good D line, so I don't want to say they were going against an easy team, because a lot of people, the misconception is Dallas has such a good O line and not that good of a D line, but in the last year it's kind of flipped, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Their O line hasn't looked as sharp because they're missing people, and the D line kind of has improved a lot with DeMarcus Lawrence and guys like that. And Taco Charlton had a sack, I know. So it was definitely a competition. You were going against a good team. But I just think you need to make a move soon, or things are going to start going south real quick. And I think you guys really need to beat Houston this week if you have any hopes of making the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it doesn't help. We lost our center for the year, broken ankle. And also, the majority of that line is new. Hernandez is new. Flowers is on the other side. He's on the right side of the line now. A lot of the line hasn't played together, and really, they kept getting to Eli because of blown assignments, not picking up the right man. I think that's something that over time they'll start to gel, but we don't have time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that actually, because it wasn't like you were getting overmatched physically a lot of the time. Dallas was running a lot of stunts, a lot of miscommunications, even with the running back of who was supposed to cover who.
Mm-hmm.
So it was honestly mostly mental, most of the mistakes that I saw.
I think by mid-season, the line will look better, whether we bring someone in or not. But we need to try to get back to at least 500 by then. And it's not going to get any easier against Houston this week. You know, they have a pretty good pass rush as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there, but I agree it's not Eli's fault. And if you have Barkley, especially in PPR, it benefits you to a certain extent.
Yeah, this week is definitely going to be a matchup, though. You're going to have J.J. Watt lined up on Eric Flowers for a whole lot of snaps. So
that's going to be brutal. I am so afraid for that man.
You're definitely going to have to stick Rhett Ellison on that side or something, just to get a chip on him, or just to give Eli some time.
Mm-hmm. And
I know the Houston defense hasn't looked like what it was. I know Clowney missed last week too. So if he misses this week again, that'd be huge for you guys. Yeah, you'll just need a different offensive game plan if you're gonna stop that guy.
Mm-hmm. I am very excited to watch Janoris Jenkins try to shadow DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
That's going to be so fun, that matchup.
Yeah.
The last game was the Monday night game, Seattle at Chicago. Chicago won 24-17. Khalil Mack once again looked like the most dominant force in the league. And his pressure actually allowed numerous teammates. Trevathan was actually, I think, defensive MVP this week.
He was NFC defensive MVP.
Yeah. He had a handful of sacks, and just the Seattle O-line looked brutal. I know they were missing a couple tackles, but they really couldn't do anything. Russell Wilson was holding on to the ball too long, but that wasn't his fault. There was nothing. There was nothing that whole game. Allen Robinson looked great, though, on the Chicago offensive side. Allen Robinson had 83 receiving yards, but he actually had a tackle as well, because Trubisky threw an interception. So if you're in an IDP league, that was a nice little bonus point or two. But yeah, Allen Robinson saw 14 targets, had caught 10 of them. So if you invested in him, it paid off this past week. I was a little hesitant about him after the injury and having an up and down career thus far, but this was a good week for Robinson owners.
Burton had a good week too. He had a touchdown, didn't he?
Yeah, Trey Burton, he didn't have a lot of targets, only I think 4 targets, not a lot of yards, I believe 20, but he did get in the end zone. So he was targeted less this game than week 1, but higher completion percentage and targeted in the red zone, which are things you like to see. So
yeah. Now let me ask you. I think the Seattle guy Disley had a touchdown too.
Will Disley, yep.
That's back-to-back good weeks for him. Do you think he's worth the roster spot at this time?
I don't want to say it's back-to-back good weeks, but it is back-to-back touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to be more of a blocking tight end when he entered the league. But without Doug Baldwin there and without really anyone else stepping up significantly on that offense, I think he should continue to see maybe 4 or 5 targets a game, which I wouldn't quite put in a starting tight end tier, but once the bye weeks come into play, I think he could be a nice fill-in. So, for example, in the Dynasty League you and I do, I have Will Disley on the bench. I only have him on the bench because both of my tight ends have the same bye week, which I didn't mean to do. It was an accident. I drafted 2 tight ends and then realized they both had the same bye week. And that bye week's coming up. I believe it's the very first week. So I grabbed Disley because he has a decent match, not this week, but the following week, and I'll play him. Week 4 against Arizona. And then if it continues, I may hang on to him. If not, I'll probably drop him because there's no need for 3 tight ends on a roster. Oh, week 5, actually. Week 5, Trey Burton and O.J. Howard have their byes, and Disley is against... it's actually the Rams, which I don't love that matchup.
They're actually... I think they're actually rated like 30th against tight ends or something. I saw that was their one weakness in their defense, actually, the Rams, because their linebackers aren't too good.
I think a bit of that was inflated because of Jared Cook's performance in week 1. I still think, yeah, they can be exposed by tight ends, but, I mean, Disley's getting red zone looks, he's getting some targets, and he's performing with them, so I wouldn't say start him, but if you have bye weeks coming up like I do, or if you have a need at tight end, say you lost Greg Olsen or Delaney Walker, then go grab him. But I wouldn't rule him a weekly starter just yet. Anything else on this game?
Not really, not too much. The Bears do look like they have a legit defense, though, which is pretty good when you have Khalil Mack leading it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see if this continues. Play the Cardinals next week, so it's not like they're going against some elite offense, so do expect it to continue.
Yeah, that should be a pretty one-sided game. But the Bears' relevance really makes the NFC North sort of up for grabs. Other than Detroit, you've got Green Bay, Minnesota, and Chicago all looking like potential Super Bowl contenders.
I don't know if I'd put Chicago in the Super Bowl contender yet. I think they have a pretty good defense. Still use some work. The offense hasn't really lived up to the hype. They got a lot of skilled players, but I don't really know how they used them so far. I still think, at least for this year, it'll be Green Bay and Minnesota. But in the next couple years, next year, honestly, I can see the Bears making a push.
If that defense continues to play the way they did the first 2 weeks, I mean, Mac really looks like he's playing with a vengeance, with a chip on his shoulder. And I agree, the offense hasn't looked quite like what we expected entering the season, but if they figure it out, I think they could be pretty formidable. I mean, I know Aaron Rodgers led an amazing comeback in the second half of Week 1, but had he not returned and Chicago started out 2-0, I think we would consider them a little bit different.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Rodgers had like 230 passing yards in that fourth quarter. That's the only thing that scares me about that defense. Jacksonville or LA or the Rams talked about just wouldn't let up 230 passing yards in one quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And it is Aaron Rodgers, so that's the only thing that scares me. And they had an awesome week this week, but it was Seattle's O-line, which might be the one O-line worse than your New York Giants.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have to keep watching them for a couple more weeks at least.
All right, so let me ask you this: any top end performances coming up this week from any specific player, just anyone you think's gonna have a breakout game?
You're talking about for next week?
Yeah, for Week 3 coming up.
Let's see. Honestly, anyone on Tampa again. I think anyone on Tampa or anyone on the Steelers. I think that's going to be a shootout. I think both defenses haven't looked good, and I think both offenses have. So I think that's going to be a 40 to 33 game or somewhere around there. I don't know what the exact number will be.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm expecting Juju, Antonio, Deshaun, and Mike Evans all to have awesome games.
Okay.
It's Connor, so
Okay.
I'd put anyone there.
I'm going to say Nelson Aguilar because Matthews probably won't play this game. If he does, it'll be in very limited role. Potentially no Sproles, no Ajayi, and we know no Alshon Jeffrey. And Wentz is returning. And I know your Colts defense stepped it up last week, but Philly's better than Washington. They just are. I think Aguilar is going to get all the targets he could handle this week against a defense that, although they looked better, I still don't think the Colts have a good defense.
Yeah.
So I think Aguilar is in for a big game this week, especially in PPR. And then I'm going to say Chris Thompson at running back, just because I believe I mentioned this earlier. I think Green Bay is going to get up big in that game. Washington's going to need to abandon the run, and if they do that, then Chris Thompson's going to be in for a lot more snaps. So
Yeah.
I think he'll have a big game. And the third one, Anunwa in the short week, just because of his comfort with Sam Darnold.
Yeah. Another player. I was just looking at my teams trying to find someone. I think Dalvin Cook. I think this is his resurgence week. I think they played Buffalo, so that should be a 40-0 game. I think this could be the week he proves why he was such a high draft pick. Goes back to him last year when he was putting up 25 weekly. So I think this should be awesome for him this week.
Now, any chance they get up big and we see a lot of Latavius Murray in garbage time?
Yeah, probably. Dalvin Cook has had injury concerns in his history, so I can see if it becomes irrelevant just to stick him in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still a risky play to start for me in that case.
Any players you think are going to disappoint this week?
Disappoint.
If you want, I could jump in, give you a minute or two.
Yeah. Let me let me find someone.
Sure. I'm going to say Lamar Miller. The Giants' defense looked decent, in week 2, and I know we couldn't score at all. But I think for the most part, the Giants held Zeke in check for the majority of that game. I don't think Houston's O-line is as good as Dallas's. I don't think Lamar Miller is as good as Zeke. So I think he's probably going to be held in check for week 3.
Okay.
So for running back, I'd say that. For receiver, Larry Fitzgerald, it depends on his health. They're against Chicago, and he's a little banged up. So if he doesn't play, I think that takes away from your David Johnson as well, because of all the emphasis Chicago could put on him. If he does play, it depends on his health. Maybe he's in a limited role, but Larry Fitzgerald really gets his fair share through volume. And if he's only on the field half the snaps, I think that could disappoint Fitzgerald owners for this week.
Okay. I'm gonna go with I think Melvin Gordon will disappoint. I think he's looked awesome this year, but I think they play the Rams next week if I'm right. And Aaron Donald, you got Dominican Sue. Not sure how well that Chargers O-line is going to fare against those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't expect him to continue his 20-point weeks. Now he does get a lot of touches, so I still could see him getting around 10 or something. But I don't see him to continue the success he's had the last couple of weeks. He had 3 touchdowns last week. I don't see that happening again.
Mm-hmm. Now we have a few players returning this week. Let me just get your opinion on. I guess we'll start with Marquise Goodwin. Should return this week. How do you think he'll fare?
I think he'll do good. I think it'll make the offense definitely better, just because since he is his feature, it could create a bit of distraction.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the two top options of their team are Kittle and the receiver Pettis, the new guy they drafted. I think they've shown a focal point to get him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure who technically is number 1 receiver, or if Marquise Goodwin will be it. I definitely think the offense will be better, just because, as I said, it'll be a distraction. But I don't know if he'll put up wide receiver 1 numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out, because he was in and out of the lineup week 1 against the Vikings. Tough matchup. And he was really, when he returned, he was really just used more so as a decoy. So we'll see what happens there. And then another returning player this week is actually in Green Bay, Aaron Jones. This week he'll probably run behind Jamal Williams and Ty Montgomery, just because it is his first week back. But what do you expect out of the 3 of them?
Yeah, I'm not expecting too much. I think as long as Aaron Rodgers is there and there's no dominant featured back, I think it's a pass-happy offense. I think Aaron Jones might be the guy. I think it's definitely him or Jamal Williams. But even if it is him, I just don't see him getting a feature role and really putting up that high of numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. And let's just throw a third one out for fun. Leonard Fournette will probably be playing this week against Tennessee at home. You expecting big things?
Yeah, Tennessee actually has a pretty decent defense, a good D-line.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Leonard Fournette could do it against any D-line. I think he's just one of those players, so I could see him having a big week, as long as he's fully healthy, as long as, I don't know, what was it, a hamstring hurting him or a foot or something?
I believe it was a hamstring.
Hamstring.
I think he will be fully healthy, because he's already practicing. He practiced limited today. He was questionable last week. He almost played. He was a game-time decision. So if he almost played last week, I think he'll be close to, if not fully healthy, this week.
Okay. Now I got a question for you.
Sure.
Michael Thomas has averaged, I think, 14 catches the last 2 weeks. He's on pace to beat Marvin Harrison's receptions record, which was in 2002 or something. He's supposed to beat it by 81 catches. Do you think Michael Thomas is the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy at all?
So, I thought there was a chance he'd be top 3 or so, just because he was the second most consistent receiver since entering the league behind Antonio Brown. I did not think he'd surpass Antonio Brown, and when all's said and done, I still don't think he will. As for breaking that record, 81, I don't think he's going to beat it by 81. Let's be a little realistic. That's a large margin to beat it by. But he is averaging 14 receptions through 2 weeks. He hasn't played the best of defenses. Tampa's D is mediocre, maybe, and Cleveland as well. Let's see. Week 4, he'll be shadowed by Jenkins against the Giants. Still has Baltimore, Minnesota, the Rams, Philly, Carolina twice on the schedule. I think he'll beat it the way he's going, but I don't want to overreact. It's only been 2 weeks. Their defense has looked terrible, so they've had to throw it that much. If the defense figures itself out and Mark Ingram comes back and they start running more, then I think he'll fall short by maybe 10 receptions. But if those things don't play out, I'd say he could beat it by about 20. I think he is consistent enough where he can average, say, 10 receptions a game going forward, 11 receptions a game the rest of the way. So if I were a betting man, I'd say I think he will beat it. Why not? Let's witness history.
Do you think?
Where do you feel on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect it to beat it by 81 at all. I think he could beat it, or at least get around there. It'll have to see. But so, do you think he'll finish as number 1 wide receiver? Do you think he'll be better than Antonio Brown? What's your position there, though?
For PPR, I'm gonna say he'll be the number 1 wide receiver. Just especially with the way he started out with all that volume. PPR, I'm going to say he's going to be the top receiver. Non-PPR, I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. He just looks explosive, and that offense has so many weapons that defenses can't completely hone in on him. He does returns. He does it all. So I think for fantasy purposes, the top receiver will be Tyreek Hill this year. But in PPR, I do think just because of volume, it will be either Antonio Brown or Michael Thomas.
Those are both of our guys in Dynasty League. You got Hill and I got Thomas.
Yeah, I reached for Hill over Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, a bunch of people. You know what it was? The pick before me was Devontae Adams, and that was who I was eyeing the whole way. And so I don't want to say I panicked, but I was going through the list. It's our Dynasty League, and I was like, this guy's injury prone, this guy's older, and I ended up going all the way down to Tyreek Hill and just loving it. Ironically, Torts and I were texting about, I'd consider trading them 1 for 1. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to stick with the guy who's less injury prone, has the nickname Cheetah. He's a year and a half younger. And so for our Dynasty League, I mean, it wasn't a trade in the works, but I thought about it, and I prefer Tyreek Hill over Devontae Adams. And now here we are 2 weeks into it, and absolutely sticking with my boy, Cheetah. All right, so anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah, that wraps it up. We will be recording again later in the week for Week 3 predictions. So we'll get this out to you as soon as we can. Probably sometime tonight or tomorrow. And then by Friday or Saturday, we'll come out with our predictions for the new week. So until then, good luck with your Thursday matchup. Nick, have a good 2 days. And go Giants.